Hi, my name's Steve Jones. You may or may not have seen me before. You may or may not know this is my third Kickstarter. The first two were for my 1500 plus and 1500 mini cases, which were successful, thankfully, thanks to the support of backers, obviously. So this is a new Kickstarter. This is not the introduction video. So this is a bit more in depth. This is trying to hopefully answer most of the questions that you're going to have, give you some more information about the products that we hope to bring to market, and to hopefully give you a reason to back the project. So you may or may not know, the idea of this was, it's quite straightforward actually. Most of the old CRT monitors are dying, you can't buy them anymore. And the retro field, it kind of has an affinity with the CRTs, mainly because of the I'm going to put bluntly, the weaknesses, shall we say, of the CRT actually gave them a certain look and gave a certain feel for the graphics on old consoles. Depending on how much you spent, I mean, my history going back with CRTs was one of staring too long at the 1084 over there in interlace mode, so I could do desktop publishing, and messed up my eyes. Whereas nowadays we would never accept that. But there is a lot to be said. I mean, all the monitors you get nowadays are widescreen, which are great. I've got a few of them, but it's not quite like running retro consoles or computers in the kind of format that they were always used to seeing them in. And hence the 4:3 aspect ratio. Now, I know some people are going to say, technically, when you actually look into the specifications of these monitors, people will say that's actually a 5:4, but I'm going to call it 4:3 now to make it easy for people to understand. But on top of being a 4:3 monitor, they also have to look the part. So when you put them on an old computer, the whole point is just so they look good. I know, and looks are subjective. Probably not correct for me to comment on whether they look good. You're the ones that are going to decide if they look good. But they have to look. So they meant that I want them to look good on my old computers, and part of this video is going to be showing you the monitors sitting on some different computers that I own, so you get a feel for what they're going to look like. Also the colour. Now there's going to be an oyster white and black versions of these monitors. Oyster white, I was thinking of changing it, making it a little bit darker, but I was talked out of it, and we did a poll for this to what kind of colour should my original cases be, and this is in line with my cases. And the one thing I found, so I'm looking around, the one thing I found, let me just show you, for Amiga fans, now bear in mind this is not just for Amiga fans, but it's fairly close. So you can look it up online. It's oyster white or RAL 1013. That's the colour of these. And one of the problems you have with trying to get that across is I've got all this lighting, I've got some funny lights up here, and I've got a big studio light over there, and it all affects the colour that you see. So I've even got one down here. So it's always, you need to see them in colour, but if you look at the colour online, you'll see the colour. Now, so another thing about it is that a CRT tends to be quite deep. Now, quite deep because you've got a CRT in it, which is huge, and it kind of goes into the back of the monitor. These don't need it. Flat panel displays are like this. They're really skinny. The panel in this is literally like that. And so you think, why would you want to make them any different? Well, my thoughts are, I'll come on to the why this is the way it is, but one of my thoughts was that I always actually wanted to make not just a monitor, but something that could be expandable and actually do something really useful. And you'll see this as this video progresses. So the depth is literally what is needed to achieve the goals that I've set for this project. And I'm having to balance between the size of the monitor, the depth of the monitor, because for shipping, the depth of the monitor with obviously the look, because some people say they'd like it to like look as fat as the old monitors, and I think they look horrible. Whereas this is the size it is. In fact, if I turn one of these round to give you a quick look, I'm looking away because I've got actually a display so I can see what you're seeing. Okay, so you can see the depth there. I'm going to come to this later on, but you see, so it's got a bit of depth to it. Ignore these screws. It's really important to understand as well, these are second generation prototypes. These are not finished products. They're going to give you a very good idea what the overall design is going to be like, but you can't look at these and say this is what you're getting. It's not. So these are 3D printed, really well 3D printed and sprayed. But when you get there, they're going to be injection molded, which is the reason for the Kickstarter. And so this is an example of being a prototype. This will not work on an injection mold, but for prototyping I wanted to see what these speakers were like. When I've been experimenting with speakers, and I made little speaker houses to pick some. And these were recommended to me, 4-inch ones, German ones. And they're actually really good, and these are the ones that I'm planning on putting in all the monitors. They are quite big, but they've got a lot of room. They've got a lot of room. They're also sideways. Now people are saying, well, why don't you put them on the front? Well, you're not going to put them on the front, are you? And I know I'm not trying to be Apple when it comes to sound, but these, in my opinion, these actually do sound pretty acceptable. I'm going to be probably underplay a little bit. I am English after all, but I think they're a lot better than the old 1084s. A lot better than that. And they're better. In fact, the sound on this is better than my 50-inch TV downstairs with the normal speakers. They've got a nice piece of bass to them. I put sound deadening behind them, so I've been on a learning curve, and so I've done quite a bit of work to try and make them sound as good as possible. Because inside you may not see the inside. But inside is a steel chassis, which is actually painted with the same qualities we make our cases. So the internal it has such a good finish on. But getting back to these, so these screws are temporary. The hole will probably change because when it comes to making a mould for these, we wouldn't be able to pull that out of a mould. So this shape here, it will still have that kind of thing there, but you won't have these screws there. So better, and that's what I mean by prototyping. So a lot of things on here. It's important for you to understand that. Okay, so let's talk about the front anyway. So you can see that there are two types here. Now they're both the same size monitor. The reason I can't make two monitors, but what I can do is I can design a monitor with a different front bezel, which is this bit here. And the idea of this is quite a straightforward one actually. This is a 19-inch panel here, and this is a 17-inch panel. But with a 17-inch panel, it allows you to have a much fatter bezel. Now what does that do for you? Nothing really, except looks. I actually quite like this thin bezel. It looks quite modern. I mean, let's say retro modern. But this one I think would stand closer than anything else because it has got that nice size bezel, and it is something that's quite nice. But you've still got a 17-inch monitor. You've still got the same quality panels. For reference, they both have 1280 by 1024 display. Hence the comment people saying 5.4 instead of 4.3. I wouldn't put an actual 4.3 panel in here because I wouldn't want it, because this size is for for the whole range of uses of this product, that is a really, really nice size, and plus the fact you can get them in good numbers. They're not rare like there's lots of these other panels, but you can't get them, quality's not very good. Whereas these are industrial grade. Now I suppose I'm going to speak a little bit about the panels. These are not cheap panels. They're IPS panels, which means that whatever angle you're looking at these, you can see them and the quality stays. Okay, so whereas with cheap panels, as you move away from looking directly in front, the quality just disappears. And some of them are just downright atrocious. I know this, I've got a few samples, they were rubbish. Whereas these panels look really nice all the way around. And that was really important to this project. It has to be a quality product. So that's why the panels we've gone for. And I haven't changed my mind on these. And I know they're a bigger resolution panels, but you don't need them, I don't believe, for retro. The compromise of this panel and the brightness of it is quite good. Part of this Kickstarter, well, I'll give you links to the actual specifications of the panels, so you can go and have a look, and you'll see that they're industrial panels, and what they use is for digital signage. So they're meant to be on all the time, so they'll have a good lifespan, and that's the aim of using better quality panels. Okay, so the main difference then is obviously a smaller panel here, which allows you to have let's call it a fatter bezel, which is much more retro. Now again I will say this, and I'll probably repeat this over and over again, these are prototypes, they're experiments not only for functionality but for design. So one of the things, I'm very pleased with the angle of this bezel here. We did experiment on the previous version of actually painting the inside of that to be a slightly darker colour. But actually when they arrived, they were horrible. It just didn't look right. It didn't look natural, it looked very false. So my wife had a genius idea, which the light will do it. And it is very true that the light on here, on the angles, does all the work to create the bezel and the shadows and everything. So I think it's this was nice. Now with the 17-inch, I made them a little bit too shallow, and so the new versions are going to be more like this, but also I'm going to pull the front out a little bit. Little things like that, that's what the prototype is for. Underneath, these are fake buttons. The reason for doing this, you think, well, why do you want to put a fake button? Well, it's really so people can see what I'm going to do. And I was asked to make these replicate what I have on my cases, and I thought it was a nice idea. So that's what that button will, and it will be a push button on the front. Underneath here now, there with the existing internal controllers, they come with a little button bar, and it's got the infrared control and that kind of thing. So I haven't modified that yet. We're possibly going to do our own version, I don't know yet, but you will have actual proper little buttons on here. So it won't be these are just holes. If you ever come along, if you've seen this at the show, these are just holes that were kind of made into the 3D print. But they're not used because there's a remote control, which is actually hiding. Hang on. Comes with a little remote control, so you don't actually need that for anything, but it's there as a backup. You'll have the buttons, and I think the buttons will look nice anyway. So yes, you'll have a power button there. Now of course, one of the buttons on here is a standby button. The standby, okay, so there is a potential, there's a standby on here. Now it kind of raises a concern, because when you turn a standby, what it does is it turns the controller into low power, very low power mode. You know what standby does, but unfortunately it doesn't do standby doesn't go to all the other boards internally. So probably not going to have a standby mode on this. I think what we're going to actually do is you power it off, okay? Because there's no reason you want to leave it in standby mode. At least I don't think there is. And so when you turn it off, it will power everything down inside, and you'll do it by that button. So now this is one of the interesting parts on the left hand side, and again this may change slightly in size, you possibly can't see it. You'll see there's like a square, a rectangular block here. This is the utility panel. Now what you can see at the moment is I've got cutouts to fit USB headers, sockets, so you can plug USB devices. So if you've got, say for example, which you're going to see on one of these is the MiSter, you can extend them to the front. But you can custom make, it will probably come with a blank. This will be blank when you get it. It may come with an example one that you can wire up. But the idea is you can make your own. And so you can make your own panel there. And I'm thinking things like for GoTech displays, for small little displays you might want to use, if you plug into it MiSter, or if you put into an OSSC with its display, display OLED. Whatever you can think of that can fit in that gap, you can put in there, and you'll be able to mount it internally. Now again, this is the thing with prototyping. The method I use to fix it works, it sits there quite nicely, but if you pushed on it, it would pop out. So that was a stupid idea in prototyping. But that'll be screwing from the back, and then it'll be quite stable so you can push things in there. But I liked the idea of having this utility panel, so it's not wasted space. So you can, things that you've got internal, you can access from the front. I thought that was very important. There was a question about having a drop down lids, you know, like the old ones. I did consider doing that, but at the end of the day, everyone loses them. Or like my one over there, the clip breaks after 30 odd years, and you end up holding it to close with sellotape. So a lot of the nice monitors don't need that; they don't have it. So I decided to forego that. You'll also notice these have got stands. Now on the prototypes, these are fixed stands. They literally just bolt to the base, and just to show you roughly what it's going to look like with the stand. Now the stand is a stretch goal, because if you take the stands off of here, you may be able to see there's feet under here, and this thing will just sit down quite nicely on a computer. And it is also from here to here, for anyone who wants to know, is the width of my Mini. About the width of the 3000, so it actually sits on it nice, and it just looks quite good in it, to be fair. But again, with the stands, we will have if the first stretch goal is met, we'll have it so you can rotate the display, turn it round and push it backwards and forwards and angle it. At the moment it's just tipped up 5 degrees. So okay, so that's the front. Now as you know, these are two completely different monitors. 1917. The model name, which is going to be 1089S and 1087S. The reason for that is obviously there was a 1084, and that was a 14-inch model, and my brain just says, well, 14.4, you can work that out. And I think they're quite nice names, so they're going to be on there. I'm not sure where. I know on the renders, Paul's put the name up here. I don't know yet. You'll see the Checkmate branding at the bottom. We want to put that on there so people can see it. Anyway, so hopefully you like the look. You're going to see these displays in action in this video. This is going to be a really long video, but I am going to index it, so you get a good feel. You can jump into the bits you're more interested in. So this introduction will waffle on as I usually do. But it will hopefully as we go along. Now, one thing in case anyone spots this, you probably can't see it now, but later on the 17-inch, I messed up the base. In fact, you can probably see the width of that is bigger than the width there. Okay, I got that wrong, and so the panel, that basically the panel without this wonderful black masking tape, you'd see the panel, edge of the panel metal. I made a bit of a boob on that, and that's what, again, prototyping. It's all fixed in the designs, obviously. But I put that there just so it doesn't look too bad. I got it perfect on this one. I've no idea don't know how I got that wrong, but there was a number of mistakes. Just so you know, you may notice on one of these panels at the side, no, that one's on. The side has popped out a little bit. This is just prototyping. Part of the I experimented with a kind of a holding system so that the sides didn't pull in, but it doesn't stop them pulling out. So when they were made, this won't tend to happen with injection molding anyway. But it's made me realise that actually I need to stop it moving, period, so it drops onto it and it grabs hold of it solid. So these around the edges are perfectly in line. So yeah, small thing, but again I learned from that, so we're going to correct that. But yeah, apart from that, I'm really pleased. I actually really like these monitors. I mean, I know I'm biased, but right. So I'll just briefly turn these round, and then I'll go through the differences, and then what we're doing, we're going to break into the individual monitors and start doing some real explanations. Right. So, what's the difference? Now let's get you to understand a key function of these monitors, the design. So, why are they deep? Well, that's because we have, at the moment I'm calling them pods, because I love the word pods. They were used in the Archimedes range of machines. And I've always liked the word pods, and I quite like that name. So someone may come along and say you can't use a name, but if we don't get any pushback from it, I'm going to keep the name. And again, now the other thing you're going to notice here is the colour difference. Again, this prototypes. I have a 3D printer. I'll come back to these later, but I 3D print these in white. Now you notice some of these I've actually sprayed to match the colour a little bit. But these are actually going to be made out of metal because it's probably going to cost way too much to injection mould all of these parts, because there's going to be so many of them. Decided to do that we can do with metal, and in fact the metal work is actually looks better, is a lot stronger, and it'll be more fit, it'll be a much better product, and the finishes be absolutely amazing on them. So we're going metal. In fact, the original prototype had metal. But for experimentation, now I've got a 3D printer. It's absolutely wonderful. So let's ignore that one for a minute. So now this one here is in a complete example of using it as an all-in-one computer. And what we have here is basically, now on both of these you'll notice a similarity. This bottom panel here and this bottom panel are the ones that come with the standard monitor. Now they might look slightly different. That's because I changed the design slightly with this one. You'll notice it's got the audios here. I've removed them, I've put them over here because you couldn't get the USB stick in easy. Lots of things like that. You'll notice I ran out of the coloured versions of these, so the two audios are black, whereas you see on there I've got a red and white one. So again, this is just a later one. But so this is experimentation. But that bottom panel there is pretty much, that one there is actually quite close to what's going to be, probably without this hole. But if you ignore these top ones here and this one here and just concentrate on the bottom, that's basically what you're going to be getting when you get the monitor. And it just like that, it has an amazing amount of functionality. You can see here now I'm using at the moment, I said let me explain how it's going to work. Inside there's a controller board. I might put a picture of the controller board up. And above that is going to be what I'm calling the breakout board. And the idea of the breakout board is, on the controller board, one of the things that's so good about it, it has audio visual input. So basically it has two composite ins and a composite out. It has VGA, it has HDMI. But internally it has the same ones all over again. So it means that you can, from inside the case, you can expand on them. So we've got this breakout board. Now at the moment I've hardwired cables to connect there, and they plug inside. The breakout board is going to be long, it doesn't really matter, it's a long skinny board. It mounts inside and it has a load of sockets, and you connect it to the main panel controller board. And it increases the functionality of what that standard board can do. But also it means it brings all the ports that you want to use as well, because obviously you've got two composite here, but they're reproduced here. So these two yellow ones are phono based, but they are the same, so obviously don't plug in at the same time. But it means you've got AV1 and AV2. These are the stereo input. I could spend ages going through all of this. Probably not worth it, but so that's for AV. So that basically reproduces these. But there's also this output. This one here is a composite output. So, and I'll come on to composite later, because the composite on this is really good. So say for example you want to stream, so you plug it in a games console into here, you go in composite, just for example, you can stream out of that straight out to a recording device at the same time, which is a really handy function that just happens to be there. We've got a VGA here, input, standard VGA, so anything that can plug into a VGA signal can be used. And it's kind of a weird place, but there's a little stereo jack here that is paired with the VGA. And so that's how you input. And of course there are input connections internally as well. Next we have, this is the HDMI. Now you'll notice, because we haven't got the breakout boards yet, the breakout boards, what they will do is they will do internal connections. So what I've done for the prototypes, we have these little connectors with ribbon cable that goes inside and does it correctly, so you get neat signals. But ultimately the internal will have a small connector and it'll be a small connector, goes to the bridge board, and there'll be an internal HDMI connector. Now it's important to understand, if you plug internally the HDMI, you can't use the external HDMI because it's the same port. So if you do put a machine inside it, or you put one of these above, that will use that port. Okay, that's quite important to understand. However, you've still got the VGA port, which can be used internally or externally. So you've still got some great flexibility there. Ignore that for now. That may well be used later on. So that's the main control panel. Now and these are the audio output jacks. At the moment, I'm doing it as a stereo phono pair. I may end up doing this normal jack, but we'll see what we're going to do on that. I haven't decided yet. And also on the front, I potentially want to put a stereo headphone jack on the front, so you can plug headphones in, obviously. Yeah, so that's the main panel, and that does the bulk of the work. Now that will probably suit 90% of people who are going to want to do any work, and even Amiga fans. Which I'm going to come to later in another section, but that's going to cover most people. I think that one there, for most retro fans, is probably good enough. Oh, the one thing I haven't mentioned is the component. This is a component input. Now it's very important to understand. It's interlaced component only. So people have been asking, can it do old game console 240p? The answer is sadly no. You can't do that, but it's interlaced. But there are ways around. As you can see, there's a component here, there's a component there. So this, if you've got interlaced signals, this is fantastic. So I basically have a component output for my Amigas. They plug into here, and as long as I leave them in interlaced mode, whatever I'm doing, it's perfect. If you're going to drop down to like run demos or games, you need to switch back to composite. Now you're going to see later how good the composite is on this. It is actually really, really good. Yeah, you do have to drop back to composite for non-interlace. So if you're using an Amiga and you want to go an interlace via component, it is fantastic. And if you're playing demos or playing games, then just switch it straight over to composite and you won't be disappointed. Oh, the audio input here is the same audio for both composites and the component. That's quite important to understand. So there's a single audio input. Right, let's cover some extras. So you can also use this as an all-in-one computer. So what I've got here is, if you see these two pod bays. Now, pods can either be single ones. So for example, this is a Raspberry Pi CM4. It's basically the input-output board, and you put a CM4 module on there, and you see I've got a heatsink, and that very easily sits on there. Okay, and as you can see, there's all your external connections. It's actually a really nice little board. But people are asking, can we use the Ice Tower? So for example, we've got a bigger version. And as you can see in here, I've got a normal Raspberry Pi 4, but I've got an Ice Tower cooler on it. And this little board here just extends the HDMI ports, as you can see from there. But it also gives you another internal USB. You could run that to the front of the machine. So lots of options. So that's a double height one. Now, you can see here, I've got a double height one here. And what's sitting inside there is, there's a clue, what's sitting inside there is a MiSter. So if you've got one of these and you want to put it inside the monitor and be able to carry it around, because hopefully you've noticed these have handles and you can carry these around. And I originally thought they might be good, maybe not, and I might remove the handles. They are so useful, and they actually work really well. So I'm really pleased with the handles, and you can pick it up. And I work up in the loft, so I have to carry them up and down from the loft, and they're absolutely fantastic for that. So well pleased with that. Anyway, this inside here is literally like this. Is sitting one of these. Okay, now obviously it's out of the case, and it's got slightly smaller feet on the base. Standoffs. But basically screws into the tray, and then I've got internal cables that plug into all the sockets, and they come out here. So as you can see, RJ45. That's for the external HDMI if you want it, because I'm using the internally HDMI. Couple of USB socket one for that. No, that's actually not the USB. These three are USB. These two are USB, VGA, and in there is stereo output from the thing. So you could, if you wanted to, run this out to a streaming rig from there. There's also a cutout here for a small fan. Again, these are prototypes, and I've not sprayed these, but they will ultimately be made of metal. But you can mount, I'm doing it so you can mount a fan on there if you want to pull some air. Now, to be honest, I mean, they do have a fan on these. I have a heatsink on this, and I've actually got a fan in there, so it's actually blowing on the D10. It's the same as this. I've got all this complete rig in there, but the holes at the top, the vents at the top, let the heat escape, and so it tends to it doesn't get hot. Let's put it that way. But if you wanted to, you could mount a fan on there and pull air out the back of it. And maybe we might even make it bigger, so you can pull a bit more air, make it a bit more usable. So that's them. So the key thing here is to try and understand is that we have 3 different options, which I haven't talked much about yet, but I will go over them briefly in a second actually. But you can have different modules that do different things. This is the base module. This is what comes with all of them, and it will cover a large amount of people's retro needs. Most people just happy plugging in composite. Some might have component, audio input and output, and it'll be probably good enough for most people. But say now let's talk about the standard, the latency in this. Now I've been trying to get one of these latency detectors, but they just can't get them. My gut feeling is about, this is not binary testing, my gut feeling is about maybe a frame of latency, maybe at most 2 frames of latency. No, it won't be that, it doesn't feel that much, but about just over a frame of latency. Now for most people they're not even going to notice that, because when you're playing the game you don't even notice it. I play the Nintendos and with this, and I play some Amiga games. My little 3-year-old loves them. I don't notice any latency, but some people are more susceptible to the latency than I am. So then we come to one of the things that this monitor is really good for. The whole point of this is that you can put products internally. So right, so as you can see I've removed this, but what we've got here is 2 retro Tinks. Now you're not going to put 2 in, okay? You're not going to put 2 in here. What I'm trying to show is that this one adapter that we'll be making available can take either. So you can put the Retro Tink Mini in it, which is this little small one, which is the one I use. You can see the cables go into it. Or you can use the Retro Tink Pro, and which would have on the side, as you can see, it's got component, it's got audio input, but it's also got Super VHS there on the input side. And that would need to come to the back, and we have a little adapter that's going to go onto the back of And then internally all that happens is you plug the HDMI in and the power, there's power connections inside from the board, from our breakout board, which give 5 volts into this, powers this, and then it's all neatly locked away, so you haven't got to worry about it. There we go. Slide that back in there. And I'll do this up because when I pull it, maybe I should might get sued copyright. There we go. Hopefully you can still see that. Yep. So that's back in there now. So I'm using the Mini, so I can put in composite. Now I'm not going to use the composite, to be honest. I'm going to use Super VHS. You're not going to buy that, put that in for composite. Now some people may say I want to actually use it because this will have, the Retro Tink is going to have a lot lower latency than what's on the base here. Now whether you can notice the latency difference is up to you. But you have the option to put one of these in if you really want to improve on everything about this. That's why this is designed for the retro enthusiast. So you put that in there, put Super VHS, and I'm going to show you all this later. I'm going to set this all up and show you. Super VHS in there. If you've got the Retro Tink Pro component in, there'll be Super VHS there, and there's your audio in. And even the buttons on the other side, we have these little buttons. Now you actually pull them. I was going to do push and try and make it really, it never worked and it wasn't reliable, so I actually settled on this, and all you do is you can hear that, we pull the button, yeah, and that it's just basically an L bend and it goes around the back, it locks into place, and you can pull on the buttons. Simple solution to the buttons. So that's in there. Now at the top, this might be a bit more tricky to pull out to show you, but I'll give it a go, as my little 3-year-old would say. Now this is the GBS-8200. I may, if I have problems showing you this, I'll pop up some pictures and I'll edit this. Right, so what you can see here is, this is the GBS-8200. And most people would say, why are you putting a GBS-8200 in there? It's not, on its own, it's not a bad little board. It's been used a lot for arcades and that kind of thing, and it does a reasonable job of translating from for EJ, CGA component, those kind of signals, old 15 kilohertz signals, and making it work on modern panels. It's not bad, but there's been a lot of people doing lots of tweaks and changes to it, and now I've experimented with them as well on other boards, but. This board on the right hand side is something different. Now a lot of you will know what the GBS-Control is. It's a fantastic piece of firmware that was created, and hopefully I'll stick a message up to say who by. But it was created by, I think it's a guy, and it runs on these little microcontrollers. And so I was going to have designed a board that would give me, I'd be able to just make a very simple to assemble system. But I met basically Byron, and he'd already done what I wanted, which was to have a SCART on the back. So as you can see, there's a SCART socket on the back. This is actually there's a new version coming. There's a SCART version for output, so you can plug any RGB Scart. Now we're possibly going to use the composite in the audio signals. I'm not 100% sure on that yet. But that SCART there, so that what happens is that comes into the system, goes for the firmware, and these little cables, now it's going to be a lot neater. Again, it's a prototype. There'll be just simple cable patch cables to connect it together. What we found is, or I've found is, that actually you don't need to make all those massive changes to the GBS. I'm not saying that this solves everything, but the one thing it does do, it fixes an awful lot. It massively reduces latency to the point where you don't need the more expensive products, and it does a whole lot of other things, which is a whole separate video. But by having that on there, You also, this has got a little web server on it, so you can log into it from a phone or a PC or a tablet, and you can control this configuration of this display and set profiles and save them. So it will boot in now, and it also has made this an absolutely viable system. Now, there are some people out there who say, well, you should have put certain capacitors here and there. Yes, you can do that. And I'm hoping that people will see it as an opportunity, if I sell enough of these, to be able to sell them, because this board's not very expensive. So I'll be putting this board in, but then you'll be able to maybe upgrade to one that's got all of the patches done to this board to make it even better. But I'm not, personally for me, I find that actually standard is good enough, and I have done all those patches myself, which was a bit of a nightmare, and I did a pretty poor job, but it worked, and I could see subtle improvements. For most people, I think this is the key secret sauce, is that firmware. Absolutely changes everything. So this board here will be selling pretty cheaply. My aim is to get it between £40 and £50 for this complete setup here, which you will add inside. But that's not stopping you using the Retro Tink or the Pro or whatever you want to use. There will also be a kit for the OSSC. That will come later now, because I've actually taken my OSSC. Originally, the first prototype had no OSSC in it, but I've actually preferred this because I'm an Amiga person. So that I found it a lot easier. I could set this up just nice for the Amiga and set it exactly how I wanted, and it booted every single time. And it didn't have a problem with change. I don't want to go, but basically it didn't recognise a piece of hardware that came at boot time on 1000. It didn't recognise it, so it wasn't showing. This, no problem at all. So I actually prefer this for me. So your mileage may vary. Anyway, so that's another one. So basically what I've got here, again, I'm going to show you it all working shortly. But what we've got here is, we've got a Retro Tink here for Super VHS, and we've got the GBS, and I'm going to use that for SCART. Okay. Again, it will take SCART, and it will take component. The good thing with the component on here is it doesn't matter if it's interlaced or non-interlaced. So you could have this board here, just add this one in, and to be honest, cover most of what you need. The only reason you would want one of these is for Super VHS, because there is no Super VHS anywhere else. And if composite's not good enough for you, then and you can't get RGB Scart or component, and Super VHS is your only way, then you need a Retro Tink and this little adapter panel, put it inside, and away you go. Right, I'm going to screw this back in. Now, again, as I said, it's a prototype, so this whole screwing thing together, we're hopefully going to get little thumbnails. And also I'm going to change it slightly because the holes are a little bit on the big side. There we go. There you go. So obviously the rear panels will match the colour of the monitor. But I think you can see, if you just use this as a monitor, if you've got all that, I don't think most people are going to need that unless you have to have Super VHS. If you have to have Super VHS, then that's what you want. But I think this and this will cover most needs, absolutely most needs. And so I think it makes, and as you see, I'm hoping that will cost around £40–45, something like that for that kit. Because the components are not overly expensive. We're trying to keep the cost down as much as we can, but there's only so far we can go. But I think you'll find that's actually not too bad, considering the boards and the cables and everything internally. Right, so that's that. So now the next section of the video is going to be actually showing you working in different configurations and so on. Right, now excuse the mess. But basically what I'm about to show you, I'm going to connect my Amiga via this little board. It goes into the 23 pin. It's got proper 23 pins to it, mate. And the component output, and that's going to go into the component input, of the standard monitor. Okay, so everything is down there. This is the MiSter in here, so there's no other things going in. That's the Amiga. I've also got, this will come into the Amiga for demos, and there's the Amiga's audio input. Now what I've done here would be interesting, because I've actually tried this, I'm pretty sure it worked. I've got two here going from the Amiga into the audio input for the AV section of the card, and I've got it on a splitter, so I've got the other half is going to a Nintendo 64 sitting over there, and I've got a composite going to the Amiga, so you can see that. So that's basically, I'm going to be running a Nintendo 64 and the Amiga to show two composite inputs, to show, and hopefully to so you can understand that even the standard board can do so much. But I'm also going to demo the MiSter system, which is sitting in the top here. The only thing I'm going to connect to that today, although I've got the Wi-Fi dongle plugged in, I'm going to plug the keyboard and mouse in, because obviously everything else is internal, so I don't need to worry about that. And that's it. So let me just connect this up. I'm going to do this and see if speed up works. Right, so here's the MiSter. You should be able to see that, okay? Yep. Let me turn this on. Oh, mouse. Right, now what I've done is, now I've connected it up. So I've got the monitor turned on, which is turned on the MiSter, which I'll show you in a minute. In fact, actually, just to prove it. There we go, there's MiSter. I have to mess around with the darkness, so I have to darken these down to be able to record it okay. And the other thing is really annoying. If I focus it in really tight on the screen, the camera is making some kind of wiry pattern on there, which is if it looks slightly out of focus, that's because I've backed off just a little bit for that reason. As you can see, there's MiSter, so that's not what we're going to look at first. So here's the Amiga display. Now, interesting thing about this is, I think hopefully you can see it. Hopefully it's not too dark and you can read that. Let me just look at the screen. Yeah, you can read that. So that's running in high-res interlace PAL mode. It obviously supports NTSC as well, if you can switch it. Now, the one thing people ask all the time, does it support, if I press that button, hopefully you see down here it says PAL. It supports PAL and NTSC, which basically means, and I get this question all the time, is it 15 kilohertz? That's a 15 kilohertz signal. So if 15 kilohertz is a 50 hertz, if it was NTSC, it would be coming in 15 kilohertz at 60 hertz, and the panel can understand it no problem. But what you can't probably tell is that is composite. Okay, this is composite, and composite is actually almost pretty usable, except the fact that if you then do this, and I go into component mode, which is plugged in on that little board, it's even sharper. Now that is pretty much RGB. Composite is obviously composite, but the monitor and the controller does a very good job of cleaning up the composite. I'm not saying it's RGB, but I think anyone who comes to see this in the flesh, when you switch between this, which is component, which is technically almost RGB, to that, which is composite, from a distance you might not necessarily be able to tell. Now you can tell, but I can even play around and improve this even more because I've tweaked it about to make it look nice. The only thing it kind of sometimes gives it away, and I think this might actually be because we've not got the breakout board in there yet. I think there may be a little bit. There may be, the wiring inside I think is still a little bit noisy. I think you can see it here. So that's the reason for the breakout board. That the breakout board will make very short cables and to connect from board to board, and then it'll be on a board, so it'll be much better signals. But look, I was shocked when I saw how good this was in composite, and that's just using, now that's a high res interlaced display, which I mean back in the day I'd have used that. I mean even that in composite, just composite looks better than I was getting with my interlaced display back in the day on a 1084 because of the flickering. It was not, RGB was sharper, but it was flickering so bad I just couldn't see it. So even that's good, but let's switch it back to component. Love it is sharp. Okay, now later on I'm going to show you on a bit later on in another video you're going to see the Amiga coming out through RGB. But I think for most people, now bearing in mind this little board's about a tenner, and with this monitor plugged into this monitor, I don't think you need any more. You don't need the extra board. The one thing again is very important. I will have to make this clear this is from an Amiga standpoint. Okay. Now I'm running a demo, so it says no signal. So I have to switch over to here. I'll let this play for a minute. Now this is running at 50 Hz. You see down there saying PAL. And it's nice and clean, sharp, and that's composite. Okay, with the standard monitor, I think you're gonna have to see this. Now most people will probably buy the other board if you're an Amiga. Now this bit's aimed at Amiga owners. But say you're not an Amiga owner. Let's kill that. Let's come back to here. Let's turn this on, and we will go. Here you go, composite. Now I'm not sure, I might have to adjust the colour slightly. Yeah, it's a little bit bright. Let me just change that a little bit. Because unfortunately with the camera I do have to drop this down a bit. That should be better. So hopefully on camera that looks a bit better. What I'm seeing now is a slightly darker image, but what you're seeing on the screen is probably quite good. I've actually got no controller in it, so I'm just letting the demo run. Actually, that might be a little bit dark actually, to be fair. But as you can see, I've got both of them. Now I put a little, let me grab this thing. Oh, I can't. So I've got here a little adapter, so two phonos into one for audio. I may actually wire the board up with this because it seems to work quite happily, even if you put two together. I've got to check from the electronics guys if that's going to work. But basically, it's just mixing them. And so you can then have the two sources going in. But of course, if you play them at the same time, you're going to hear the same audio, the mixed audio, obviously. But it might mean it's nice to have them connected. So there you go. So now to me this is great. Again, it's different people will have different needs, but we play this happily all the time, and we have a great time with it. So that's composite. Let me just turn that off, and I'll switch back to the Amiga, and that's composite. Now, one thing I don't know if you can hear this, but on the 19-inch, not on the 17, but on the 19-inch for some reason. Now that is nothing to do with size. I think it's just the way I built this thing. As I said, experimented. I've got a slight whistle. I don't know if you can hear it on the speaker. On the 17-inch, doesn't do that. On the 17-inch, I put proper audio cables, shielded, to see if that improved, and it did improve it. Obviously, when we go to the let me kill that. When we go to the breakout board, it'll all be shielded, so we shouldn't have any issues long. We won't release this obviously with whistles, and I want to be open with you that this is part of the prototyping process. You'll see this on the next video, on the next section when I'm showing you the monitor. Anyway, let's go back over to here, which is the MiSter. Let me boot something on here. Console, just to give you a feel for it. Oh, hang on. Hopefully is that too dark or is that too? I think I might brighten it up a little bit. Yeah, I think I'll brighten this up a little bit. Let's not go too far. Right. Now, let's turn the volume down. It's hard to tell about the let's kill the sound. It's hard to tell the sound, but there is a way of doing it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump into here. In theory, I should have a right. Now to show you the sound, I want you to hear the sound, and it's obviously difficult because my speakers actually, my microphone's actually pretty good, but I just want to play some music so you can hear it. Now, I don't want to play any demo music because you've already heard a game playing then, but let's listen to something that's hopefully will test the speakers a little bit. Plus I like classic. Right, that'll do. Right, what we'll do now is we'll come back to here and and we'll go return and then a movie. I think they might be a little bit bright. Yeah, it's a little bit bright, isn't it? Let me just turn it down. Oh, that's too much. We're balancing out getting this right. Because of the settings I've got on the camera, you see. Because the microphone's over there, I'm just going to turn that round so it's kind of giving it the full balance, because otherwise it's very right centric, it was recorded. I suppose while we're doing this, actually, what I could do is I could show you the angle here. Make sure I'm not bonking into anything. Oh, no, that's big, isn't it? I might want to get the brightness up a bit, actually, before I do this. There we go. Right, if I turn that around. There you go. You have to turn it a long way around before it's not, you can't see it. That's the wonder of IPS. Now if you were sitting here, oh, now it's too bright, it's burning out a bit. Let me, unfortunately it's the camera, it's the ISO sitting on the camera. It's very difficult to get balance. I'm getting this right, isn't I? Oh, hang on. Contrast. Oh, that might be better. Talk about messing around. Anyway, look, it's a case of seeing it in the flesh. I mean, it looks absolutely fantastic. And you'll see it, hopefully it shows. Turn this around. Anyway, enough of that. Let's go back to, okay, now what we've got here is we have my BBC Micro, which is going into the RGB. We have my Atari 800, which has got Super VHS going into the Retro Tink with its audio in there. Okay, I've got my Amiga going back into the component. Right. And I've got the Nintendo and the Amiga's composite going in with the audio into the back, and I've got the memory stick in there again. So let's turn it round and turn it on. Better turn the Amiga on. Right, now reminder, this black bar at the bottom. Prototype error. Prototype error. It won't be on the final one. Right, so here we are. This is the 17-inch. As you probably already saw, I've got it connected. I've got the Amiga connected via composite and via component or YUV, as you can see here. Again, my apologies if the colour balancing isn't quite right. It looks okay on my test screen up here, but I have to mess around because of ISOs and stuff like that. So, yes, you can see that this is a bit dark, but the rest of it's not too bad. So yeah, this looks absolutely wonderful. And if I want to run some other software, as long as I keep it in interlace mode, we're okay. I can play music. Let's go high res lace. Well, that's high res. Again, remember what I was saying, if you want to use non-interlace, just switch it to composite. There we go. And pull that down so you can see what's behind it. I might bring it up just a bit, the brightness. I spend all the time trying to get it just right for the camera. Maybe a bit better. So you can see for the Amiga, the component input is fine, but if you switch back to composite, okay, you probably can't tell the difference. On the camera, you're probably going to struggle to tell the difference. You will notice it's not quite as sharp, it's composite, but it's actually more than usable, so everything just runs really nice in that mode. But of course, if I switch over and I go back over to here in composite, Here we go, we've got a little bit of Nintendo 64 with Mario. And I play this on here, and I'm not the greatest game player in the world, I would admit it, but I don't notice any lag. I know there will be lag because the way it works, because it's stabilised and it's doing all this other trickery pokery. This controller is designed probably primarily for TVs, so it's got fairly good circuitry in this, but it's also those internal connectors. In fact, I brought one down with me so you can see it. So it would be a bad idea to talk about that now. There we go. So basically what you have here is you have all your connectors up the top, so the two AVs, but what's really important is these connectors, 1, 2, 3, 4, not so much that, but that's 5, that's output, okay? So this one here is for your audio AV inputs, this one's for your YUV or component input, this one's for the RGB input, and that one's for HDMI. So what they give you is an internal way of connecting, which makes this whole thing work. So yeah, there you go. So there's composite. But what about if we want to go up to Super VHS? Now, my Atari 800, you can see here, if I switch this into HDMI mode, now the reason why I'm switching it to, I might have to reboot, oh that's fine. Why am I switching it to HDMI mode? Because the retro Tink that it's plugged into, that's inside the back of the monitor, connects to the system by HDMI, and that's how it does all its great effects. Now again, I've got the switch on the back, I can change the settings from the retro Tink, but let's just quickly click on something. Oh no, that was rubbish on it. Let's try that again. Right, a little bit too quick on the buttons there, I think. Right, my demos, you'll recognise this one. This is for all the Atari fans. Obviously I'm an Amiga fan, but I'm sure the Atari guys will appreciate this. There you go. Yeah, look, it's not just Amiga. In fact, I would like, the reason I'm doing this, before all the Atari ST owners get excited, Jake Miner created the chips in here as well, so you know. But no, there you go. So that's a lovely. Now again, you can run this in composite, and to be honest, it's not a lot different. It is sharper. It is sharper. But the Super VHS going into here, it looks really nice, and it's nice and pin sharp. I've actually got another demo, but the only thing with this, I still haven't figured out how to. I'm terrible, really, aren't I? Some reset. Can I think it's just. Did I get rid back to here? No, see that just takes me out to. Now here's an interesting thing. 480. I don't know if you can read this. 480p, 60 Hz. So my Amiga's PAL, my Nintendo 64 is PAL, but this is an NTSC import. So this is actually an imported Atari 800 running NTSC. No problem. I'm going to turn it off because I'm not sure what the secret. Now here, this is the pattern from the retro Tink, and you can see it's actually a little bit bright. So what we'll do is we'll just again play with it, turn it down just a bit, see, get it right. And now it's gone on it. Drop that down just a bit, and then we'll turn it back on again. Can you? I know it's too dark. I may just have to just leave this. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we go back into here. There's another nice one in here. I really like this. I bought this because it's a J Miner machine, but I'm really impressed with this. Now, if you're a Commodore 64 fan, which came a few years after this, which is pretty much the same machine as this, I know you'll probably go excited about your SID chip, but the chip in here is actually pretty damn good. But the Commodore 64, I think it's got a composite output, so you can use that. But you can get a Super VHS output for that, and then you just need a retro Tink. Then you can plug that into here to get that nice sharp display. And let's I quite like this one. Another little Atari logo. Takes a little while to get going. Yeah, it's a little bit. This is the worst thing about doing this. You should just. I've got the trouble, and I suppose here's another interesting point. The reason why this is such a pain in the butt is because it remembers them. It remembers all the settings for each input, which is really useful. It's not a global setting. I know some people will probably complain about that, but the different inputs can be at different levels. So you can adjust them for each input, which is fantastic. But of course, when I'm doing this, I'm dropping them up, dropping them down a lot. Let's see about bringing it up a little bit brighter. There you go. It's probably too bright now. Anyway, so that's that. Now let's go and have a look at something else. Let's go and have a look at the BBC Micro. Okay, so now what we got here, here's a BBC Micro, and this is plugged in via the RGB Scart. So obviously I could have gone composite, and again it looks great, but it doesn't look as sharp as this. Now this is going into the board. Now you'll notice it's not filling the whole display, but because, in fact, I tell you what might make it good. This will be a bit of a give me a break just for a second. So now what we have here is the BBC Micro, and it's running through Scart. It's plugged into the GBS-Control. In another section I'm going to show you the Amiga running in the same mode. But what I actually want to show you is, I'm just going to run up again Arkanoid. So just to show you, you've got this, the main thing is you've got this RGB Scart input, okay? And it runs brilliantly. But you've got this app. I think you can see it. Yeah, you can see this app. Now this app is communicating with that server, okay? And if you watch, if I go to move, if you watch the actual display, you'll see it move as I touch this web page. Yeah? And I can go up and I can go down. So basically the controller on the RGB input is, hopefully you can hear me over this. In fact, let me kill this. Let's kill that. Right. So, star, let me just load that. Right. Oh, deboot 0. Star. Okay. So basically, by using this in the browser, I'll move it out of the way so you can see it. So I can change the borders. You can't actually see it because it's all black, it's not helping. But you get my point. I can scale it. If you can see it getting bigger. And then I can move it. Yeah? So you can set it up however you want. And if I keep scaling, I'm not quite sure how big I can go with this. Hold the button down. Oh. Okay, so let's move that over here. Okay. Now there's all kinds of other tools. So I can move the memory a bit to the right. And then no, I think that's as far as I can scale it. Let me come over here and see if I can scale it more. Here we go. Right. And all you do is you play around with this until you're happy. Right, I'll go back to here. You see? Oh, actually, now it's starting to get a bit messy in the middle. So obviously I've messed that up. But if you make a mess of it, all you have to do is you go back to here and you select load preset and you're back where you started. So you can control it in this browser on a phone or anything like that from the web page. Set it up. I've got it set up for Amiga because obviously I use it mostly in my Amiga to plug into it. But you can plug anything that's got RGB Scart. Right, so the Amiga, from Amiga to the panel, is now going in through RGB. So what you get now is you get the best of both worlds. So we've got this high-res interlace. Now you'll notice I've not filled up the full screen, but I can change that quite easily. Here we go. Okay, so bear in mind it's all flicker fixed. RGB Scart coming out of the Amiga into the display, giving me a full PAL interlace over scanned workbench. If I open up, say, D-Paint, now because we're going into the GBS-8200, I can set low res, use, and it works. And I can load up that picture again. Saying no. There you go. So I've now got that image, low resolution. Yeah. And it's all good. So as you can see, it's working great. Now, say I want to run a demo. I've got one here, the same one again, Demons. I've got sound off. Oh, sound's not connected, is it? My only concern is... Right, okay, so interesting to note, for reference, I'm recording this at 30 FPS. And so what you're seeing, the scrolling along the bottom is a bit jerky. Ignore that, because on here, it's the occasional glitch, to be fair. But it's completely smooth, because this is running at 50 FPS. So you can see that it says PAL 50 Hertz. Okay, that's all good. It's just the fact of my recording. I'm recording at 30 frames a second, so hence you're not quite seeing what I'm seeing. But yeah, as you can see, so you don't have to change anything now. So if you've got one of these cards in there, you can just use it for any mode you like, which is I think absolutely fantastic. The one thing you can do with it, which I quite like, is you can use PAL super high res. Which I think is pretty amazing. There you go. Oh, just excuse me. Just getting over a cold. Great, isn't it? There you go. So we got super high res, which is something like 1380 by 576. Does tend to make things look very tall. Right, so I've got super high res PAL going in, and if I drag that down, I've got a low res screen behind it, and I've got a bell going off. It's all going off, isn't it? So I've got that. I've got to be honest, I think that's pretty amazing. Here we go. You might be able to see it as you move the screen. Oh no, you can't see it on there. If they can't see it here now. You do. What it does is, because it's actually interlacing, and then it interlaces, it flickers for a second, then it stabilizes. Okay. So if I pull that down, you can see it, and then it stabilizes. Boom, done. Okay. So I think that's pretty cool. So that's Amiga with the monitor. Again, I don't. If you can live with the way I did it before, which is component but only an interlace, and then if you want low res, go into composite. You don't need this GBS board for Amiga people, and that's an awful lot of people. Obviously, then it comes to the fact of for Vampire owners or people who've got HDMI and using the Amiga outputs. You can do that as well. I mean, you can. Now, the thing you can do is you can switch. Obviously, you can switch between them with this, but what I'm trying to get made is an automatic switcher, which will do it on when you change screen, so it'll know which screen mode you're on, and literally just almost like press this button for you, and be an infrared little box. I don't know whether at the moment whether we can get that made, but that would be quite nice if we can get that made. But I can't promise it. But so at the moment it's manual. It's not a big deal. You just press the HDMI button, which I've turned that off. So let's turn that back on so you can see something. There we go. So you just turn that, and then if you want to come back to the other one, just come back to VGA, and then it switches. I suppose one thing I am hoping to get done, this bar at the bottom, once it's going live, is it's only have it up for a couple of seconds or a second. At the moment it sits there for about 4 or 5 seconds, which is quite annoying. But apart from that, I think it's fine. Okay, so that covers a lot of it. There will be more videos coming soon. And hopefully this has shown you that, and hopefully you've got some interest in it. And I'll see you in the other videos.